It's been an amazing journey over the last few years. Hopefully all of you and your families and loved ones got through the pandemic without any major issues. It's so good to get people back together again, and really appreciate your presence here. And we are very much looking forward to presenting a lot of content to you, but also learning from you. Your feedback, your input, your suggestions, criticisms, all of those things are more than welcome. We've arranged a dinner to be able to get the network built as well, so that you can all get to know each other and share observations and lessons learned and things like that and get value out of that. We're at an inflection point as a company and as a product. We have been in existence. DDTech was formed with CMG back in 2011. We were the first to become compliant with the demand-driven MRP methodology, and then demand-driven operating model, then demand-driven S&OP. At the time, we were bootstrapping the company, and it was some interesting times in the early days. In 2017, we raised our first round of venture capital because at that point, we were starting to see that the market was there, that there was a real growth opportunity. And we partnered with a fund here in Atlanta called Mosley Ventures, who've been more than supportive and more than helpful. In the ensuing few years, we raised additional capital. We've progressed quite a ways. Our average revenue growth rate has been in the neighborhood of 40% for all these years. So it's become a very healthy business and a very promising business, and one that has a lot of opportunity going forward. We've also realized that as our business has evolved, that there's a lot more to the supply chain world than, I'll say, just the DD stuff. And I want to talk through this morning because I think these messages are really critical that we kind of get on the same page about, get your feedback around, so that we really kind of see the way we can create what I think most companies are looking for is agility and resilience. You hear that a lot in the market these days, but I don't see a lot of evidence of people talking about how you actually do that. It sounds aspirational, that's great, but there's a lot of things that you have to do as fundamental to that. So we still are we're the world leader in demand-driven deployments by any measure. It's a foundation of what we're doing, but there's more to the story that we need to keep building this out and fleshing it out. And Chad's presentation, which will follow mine, I think will also be an illustration of other concepts about how we can take this base foundation and take it to a new level. So with that, I just want to talk a little bit about how I see the market, meaning the supply chain industry, the market realities, and things that people are dealing with. And I've got some fairly strong opinions about that, and I'll share those with you. And if you have different ones, I would more than welcome your feedback. But I think it's important that we get on the same page in terms of what is the context within which we're operating, and how can we make that better. I think there is a huge cry in the market for agility and resilience, and we'll talk about how do we really define that. What are the attributes that we can utilize to be able to recognize if we're getting more agile, if we're getting more resilient, right? How do we measure that we're actually moving in that direction versus just making some nice statements and not really showing any demonstration of it in the numbers that matter? From that, then, we can start to look at what would be the characteristics of an agile and resilient supply chain. What are the attributes? How would we describe that? And then we'll look through the various modules of Intuiflow and how they can bring to life the very fundamental actions and improvements that we need to be able to make all of those a reality. So with that, let's start here. My favorite chart. This is a picture of U.S. manufacturing inventory turns over the last 25 years based on data from the Federal Reserve. It's flat. We are where we were 25 years ago. And as they may say in the military, whiskey tango foxtrot, I mean, how is it that this can be the case? Because if I then showed you the SAP revenue chart, how it's grown incrementally over the years, it looks like, wait a minute, I thought part of what they were trying to do is help us get to a better place in terms of core supply chain metrics. Now, I'll be the first to recognize that there are some headwinds against this chart. Things like product proliferation, SKU proliferation, and other factors like that. Global competition, some offshoring. There's obviously some other headwinds that have kind of influenced this chart. But by and large, And after having done this now with over 140 clients around the world, we know that there's a pretty stark reality out there that I would argue the software industry should have done a better job than that. Anyone disagree with that? So everyone's on the same page. We all agree that this is a problem, right? Okay. It's just amazing to me. And I saw this during my career with IBM. I spent 31 years with the company, primarily in the consulting and systems integration division. I was VP of Ops for the division in North America, then in Europe. And we would do reviews of how the consulting projects were going, right? And at the end of the day, they were lasting way too long for like SAP deployments or Oracle or whatever. And at the end of the day, the fundamental financial metrics around supply chain had not moved an inch. Not better on time and full service levels. Inventory turns were what they were. How the hell is it that after we've invested all this money, we haven't made improvements? And we know, and we'll talk about, there's some pretty clear examples of why that's the case, because the logic never really changed during that period. The ideas never changed. But more importantly than anything, in my opinion, nobody went back to the drawing board and challenged the assumptions. I'm a big SpaceX fan. The guys in my software group always tease me about how long it'll be when we start a meeting before I bring up the Dragon capsule or SpaceX. But the one thing you can't deny is they kind of revisited all those assumptions, went back, figured out how to land a rocket on the tail, and the whole market for space exploration changed dramatically, right? And there's an opportunity, I think, in supply chain solutions to do something very similar. We all know this story. Inaccurate forecasts, perpetual firefighting, workarounds, item proliferation. The one that really has caught my attention of late, though, has been staffing and labor issues. Every one of our major global clients, and every other client for that matter, are seeing challenges with maintaining staff and expertise in their supply chain community. The old gray-haired guys like me who had gotten their CPIMs and their APIC certifications and walk around the APIC show with this long chain of badges on their badge, they're not around anymore. And the people coming into these jobs tend to be younger folks, which is great, but they grew up on cell phones and touch screens and other technology, and they look at the stuff that's out there and they think, oh my God, you want me to use that? And when they don't understand it, when they don't trust it, what do? Get out their favorite supply chain solution, Excel, and start coming up with their own business rules to try to make their way through the day. And God save them. Because there's more product proliferation and more items to manage, and at the same time, companies are trying to downsize the workforce in those communities because it's a cost center. So we've got things going in opposite directions, and that's not a good place to be, right? Any comments on this? Is this resonating well? Yes? Yeah. All right. Okay. So I think that's why there's so much interest and discussion in the media around the supply chain about agility and resilience. It all sounds so clever, Who would have imagined that the pandemic was coming? And look what it did to all of our businesses, right? I mean, unbelievable stories we've heard from various clients around the world the last few years. Just crazy, crazy things going on. We saw the toilet paper syndrome in spades, in resin, in containers, in all sorts of stuff where people overreacted when the pandemic hit, which then created all these disruptions. And then real issues emerged where people couldn't get materials or equipment or parts or chips in the automotive industry because there were staffing issues. Everybody was on lockdown, or you had limited staff because of protocols for COVID, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it was a stark reality that I think is probably, hopefully, only a once in a lifetime kind of event. But it's really resonated this, hey, we need to be more agile, we need to be more resilient. The way I think about that, it means we need to be able to adapt if there's changes in the market quickly. We can't be in this kind of long supply chain situation where it's going to take us 3 months to start to pivot a little bit to whatever changes are coming our way. We need to be able to respond more quickly to whatever our customers ask for, because it's a competitive environment. And he who can answer first is typically going to win most of the business, right? When we do have disruptions, and we've learned some rough lessons about that, we need to figure out ways to recover more quickly. And we also need to be able to help our teams focus on the right priorities. Because by definition, when you're in this environment, some people call it VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. Everything is going off the radar screen. And so you don't know what to focus on. The better we can do to help you identify where the true focus should be, where your energy should be spent, then obviously, we're going to be in a better place. So I think this is really the context. We haven't seen improvements. We should be able to do better. We also know that we have to learn to be more agile and resilient. And so really, how do we get to creating that? So we sat down as a team and started looking at what would be measurements or indicators of agility and resilience. How would we actually quantify so that we could say, yes, we've gone from here to here, so now we're in a better place. Obviously, if we can improve our service levels, we are being more agile. The market is going to be dynamic and volatile and whatever, but if we can actually achieve better service levels, then we are in a more agile environment, right? If we can be more responsive, by that I mean have shorter lead times. If we can turn more rapidly than our competitors, then we are more agile. I mean, the whole idea of agility is, kind of to paraphrase the way Goldratt used to talk about, Archimedes' famous quote, if I had a lever long enough, fulcrum in a place to stand, I could move the world. Well, if we had infinite flexibility and responsiveness, then whatever walked in the door, we could answer, right? Now, theoretically, we're never going to get there. But the more we can move in that direction, the better able we will be to meet whatever needs come down the road from the market, right? And so we have to find ways to compress lead times. We have to find ways to give us a faster ability to pivot and change when that's required in the market. We want to make sure we've got the right amount of inventory. By that, I mean, it should be aligned to what the true market consumption is. We shouldn't have too much of the wrong stuff, not enough of the right. A very, frequently used catchphrase in the DDMRP space. But it's about understanding what does that really mean? Because I think there's a lot of advancements we've made in this area that I think you'll find very interesting when we talk about the Project Autopilot tomorrow in the last session. We have to use our production capacity wisely, right? We don't want it committed on long horizons, making stuff that the market's not buying, right? Goldratt used to say, no one is sold until the end user has bought, right? Even though your metrics may look like you've sold something, it's really a false promise, right? So we have to make sure that we align and utilize our production capabilities very, very wisely. And we'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute when we go through the different modules of the solution. And this is a big one for me, is automation. Why in God's name is it so hard for people to be able to trust the system and what it's telling them to do? It's just, maybe we have a natural human capacity that we always want to tweak things. I don't know, but we have more and more clients starting to use auto approval functionality and things like that. And obviously, if we go back to that issue where we got more item proliferation and fewer staff, we have to learn or get to a place where we can confidently let the system do more of the work. Do we agree with that? Yeah. So how do we get more automation? And then obviously continuity. Given the staffing issues, given the amount of turnover, we've been working with Coca-Cola for a number of years now over in Africa. And it is amazing how much staff turnover you have. In other big global clients like this, you go across the plants, people who were there at the start of the project a couple of years ago, half of the people have moved into other jobs by now. So if we don't create a solution that's easy for people to get on board with, understand, recognize, and trust, then obviously the more we can improve that for you, the better off we're all going to be. So we think these are kind of the markers. You all may have other ideas. I'd love to hear your suggestions on this, because I think the more we can kind of lock in on what are we trying to get to, the more our energy will move in the right direction. Okay, so let's walk through the different modules of Intuiflow, formerly known as Replenishment Plus, and now the material planning module of Intuiflow. If we can pace to real demand, we are more agile, right? I mean, by definition, you're not planning to some forecast or estimate of what the sales are going to be. You're actually set up to be able to pace your materials to the actual demand in the market. If we can reduce our response times by compressing lead times, we are more agile. So the ways we can do that through bill of material, strategic buffering within the bill of material, other strategies within our supply chain, those are good things that we should focus on. If we can manage variation better, we will be more resilient. And we'll show you some very interesting insights that we've gained through our machine learning work on buffer settings tomorrow in the Project Autopilot. But the better, I honestly think a lot of the real meat and benefits in the demand-driven concepts, it shifts the focus away from forecasting to be more about understanding variation, where it comes from, how much of it you have, and how well can you manage that, right? So managing variation is effectively helps us deal with ensuring that we've got the right service levels, we've got the right inventory levels. And obviously, if we can strategically deploy DDMRP buffers where appropriate, and I underline where appropriate, it is not a silver bullet. We don't want to ever be perceived as that is the only answer. It is part of the toolkit you should be using. And I don't think there's a client in the world that can't get benefit from DDMRP. Just it's going to be in varying degrees, right? Some clients, Coca-Cola, almost all their items are buffered. Other clients, some that you'll hear maybe Deborah talk about, the buffering component is a piece of the story, but it's not the whole story. And there's other elements that play in there. From a scheduling and execution standpoint, the shorter our release horizons can be, the better, because by definition, gives us the flexibility to adjust the next time period out and be more responsive to changes that may come in our order book, right? If we are utilizing our production capacity to meet that true market demand, we are getting the best financial results for our production environment. And if we can use time and capacity buffers, which is really the core foundation of the scheduling engine, the drum buffer rope capability, then we are attacking variation, which is the enemy of any kind of operational environment. The more we can address that, obviously you can still do all your, process of ongoing improvement to make the process more less variable and the like. But the more we can manage variation for you, the more stable your production environment will be. And that's where demand-driven capacity scheduling through the scheduling and execution module comes in. A lot of folks are here interested in this. We'll be doing a short demo. Miles will be doing a demo on the platform as part of the breakout sessions this afternoon. It is a teaser demo. It's not for you deep experts who've been on the platform for a while. We do have a demo stand. We'll be more than happy to answer other questions on that as we go. Sales and operations planning. This is what was called the advanced planning module. It's now called the S&OP module. The S&OP module, we've got a breakout on it, is not just for those who are doing S&OP. There are many companies who have looked at S&OP and say, I don't want to do that. It's way too much work, way too labor intensive. You know, they're thinking in the old way of trying to approach it. And the genius of demand-driven S&OP is it focuses your attention not on celestial alignment, as I call it. You know, let's all hold hands, get our consensus demand plan together. We'll take a few weeks to get that done. Then we'll build a consensus supply plan. Then we'll go through a final set of reviews with the mid-level executives. Then we'll take it to senior executives. By the time we've gone through that whole cycle, the assumptions that we started with have started to erode on us. And all that effort we put into coming up with an S&OP plan is really not going to give us a lot of business value. If instead we said, what the hell may break? Let's stress test the system and see where the inflection points are, where if this or that happens, you know, all hell's going to break loose. And instead, thinking about building agility, think about if we actually invested some more production capacity, it would give us the ability to insulate ourselves from some of the eventual things that are going to happen to us. Or if we had different relationships with certain suppliers, or lots of those are the discussions that I think you can have more value from. I mean, back when I was at IBM, we knew how to do S&OP like nobody's business, right? They called it the fall plan for the fall of the year. It started in June and it went till December, right? And it was budgeting and planning for the next year. And I was, in my role, one of the key things was managing the supply chain of skills within our consulting division, right? So we had lots of different skills, thousands some different skill sets. When they came to me and said, Erik, in 18 months, how many Java developers do you need? And I tried to say, why the hell do I care? And they said, well, you need to know. I said, no, I don't. Because I can get on the phone today and find as many Java developers as I want, because there's so many in this, subcontracting market of blah, 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 blah. But if you ask me the question, how many redwoods do I need? Redwoods were my software architects. Brian, where are you, Brian? Oh, you walked out. These were the real guys who could put an application or a system together, right? They're just, and you go ask them, how do I get more of you? Because they were our constraint. And I would get what I called the redwood answer. Right soil and climate, no lightning, 300 years, and you'll get another island. And we didn't have time to wait for that, right? Because it just was so much the experience and the knowledge, and they've been through all the technologies and things like that. We don't plan ahead for those, yeah. So you got to think about, and Chad will talk about relevant ranges and all that stuff. Think about using the S&OP process to stress test your business, not try to get to a perfect plan. It's a false promise, right? And so the S&OP module is there to create an exception management oriented approach. The idea here is to lighten the workload, but get better value out of the effort you put into it. Where the buffers need to be adjusted, where do we need rough cut capacity planning showing us that we've got peak loads that we need to pre-build for, or whatever, that if we can try to limit the amount of attention that you need to spend, but get it focused on the right priorities, then we get to a better place. And then demand planning. Oh my gosh. What? We'll talk about this after the lunch break. We are introducing a demand planning software. We have had a number of clients ask for this, and we have found a partner in France that we're going to work with to deploy their system within our environment. So excited about this. And we've got early days on this, but the idea here will be a collaborative platform, easy to work with, tied directly into Intuiflow so that all the data is moving back and forth with no effort required. I'll actually show you in the S&OP session a little illustration of making a forecast adjustment for a promotional, see it coming back into the S&OP module, and then building intelligent adjustments off of that. My big advice here is avoid masking and smoothing out the demand forecast. Let the noise be alive. That's where you're going to get better insights. That's how you're going to be able to better stress test your environment. And the more active your team can be collaborating around that, maybe doing a range of forecast assumptions, now you start to have the ability to know where those high and low watermarks are within your operating model that you need to be able to plan ahead for. Make sense? Yeah. All right. So this is kind of a takeoff on Chad's EDA model. I love this chart. The whole idea here is S&OP, DD-S&OP should be about model configuration and learning from the variances that you've experienced in the past. And that iterative loop becomes the lens through which you can make better improvements into your operating model. Chasing that ideal, if we had ultimate flexibility, we wouldn't have to worry about forecasting anything. We had the capability to respond. And so these elements are all part of the platform now in Intuiflow. And each of the modules have a role to play in that. There are synergies like between scheduling and execution and material planning in terms of the priorities on the buffers, influencing the priorities in the scheduling algorithms. We will eventually be able to come back with a capable a capacity availability check, like we have a material availability check. The synergies between the demand planning module and the S&OP module, obviously there's a very natural relationship there. And from a demand planning, we don't show kind of the long end of the DDAE model here, but the longer range, big grain questions, the redwood kind of questions that I mentioned a couple of minutes ago would obviously be supported by the demand planning platform as well, including financial forecasting, which is a bit of a new dimension for us. So that's the suite. We also still continue to have the distribution module that has been very widely deployed by clients. One of our automotive clients, Aptiv, they're going to be doing a success story on that at our French user or European user conference over in France next month. Many clients getting great value from that. So that's been really exciting to see. Scheduling and execution now is fully in the cloud. There's still some wrinkles here and there where it's not quite the same as the legacy on-prem version, but very close. We've got a lot of work going on that front going forward. To me, these all should be focused on giving us differentiators. We'll talk about autopilot tomorrow, but its real goal is to achieve two major objectives. One is increase ease of use in deploying inventory planning methods in the software. It shouldn't be about having to try and figure out all your settings for the smart buffer profiler and things like that. It should be something that is way more intuitive and easy to follow. And the second side of it is gaining that confidence that we want the users to have so that they trust the system, so that we attack that issue of too many parts for too few people to manage. Let's get to more automation in the environment. Make it easy and intuitive, make it easy to understand, right? You know, kind of continually ask the team, what would Steve Jobs have done had he been passionate about supply chain software, right? I mean, one mouse button instead of two. You know, I never will forget the first time I picked up an iPhone. It was just massively better than anything you'd had before that. And I think there's a lot of gains we can make there. We are multi-method now. We're going to be able to plan to forecast for items where that makes sense, which is, we could always kind of do that, but now it's going to be more on the same level as all of the demand-driven functionality that we've got. When I decided to join with CMG to found the company, the whole guiding principle or the competitive strategy, if you will, was this sophisticated. It was, if big ERP is long, labor-intensive, and the needle will never move, then as long as we do something that's the exact opposite of that, we'll be okay, right? So rapid time to value, make it easy for customers, and make sure they get a result, right? Make sure that the needle moves in a positive manner. Okay, you're going to hear me talk this metaphor a lot. To me, the software that's out there is like if you were the astronaut in the Apollo space capsule back in the 70s, right? That's when MRP was conceived, by the way, right? The astronauts were literally part of the computer, right? They didn't have very good batteries. They didn't have very good computers back then. So they had all these scripts and things they had to do at various points along the way to get to the moon and back, right? And they're pushing the buttons, flipping the switches, turning the knobs, all that stuff. Only the best of the best of the best got to go on those journeys, right? And so how come it is now that SpaceX can send civilians to outer space for 3 or 4 days on an automated journey, AI-enabled, whatever, with cool-looking spacesuits and an iPad? I mean, how can we see that be achieved, and yet we can't get supply chain software to a better place? This is where my passion is. And I think that's what we're really trying to do. Obviously, we're proud of the business. We've grown a lot. We've got a global presence. We're on 6 continents with clients now. For those of you who are online, thank you so much for your time and attention and support, and for all of you here in the room with us, obviously, today. We greatly, greatly appreciate that. There have been some learning curves we as a company have gone through. You know, there's times when the software wasn't quite as good of code quality as it should have been. We're getting much, much better at that. We're growing up as a business. We've got great processes. Brian has done a phenomenal job as our VP of development. We'll talk a little bit. Brian will be presenting tomorrow. So we really, really appreciate all this. The great news is that we see application opportunity across a wide range of industry segments, right? There is a part of the story can apply, whether it's food and beverage, automotive, pharmaceutical, life science, heavy industrial environments, and things like that. This is just a snapshot of some of the clients that we're working with today. But they have had so much to do with the progress that we've made and the success that we've gained to this point. So that's kind of our context and our story at this point. And be interested if any of you have any questions. It's just that easy, huh? You bought it hook, line, and sinker? Look, I'm around, eager to hear your feedback. We'll have a lot of opportunity to collaborate. But again, thank you so much for all of the contributions you've made to where we're at. I hope these messages resonate. I do believe that the demand-driven concepts are foundational to anybody trying to create more agility and resilience, right? And so it's now, how do we put those pieces together and give you the tools in a way that you can really leverage and get maximum value from?